welcome everybody to our first Digital Services Forum meeting of the year. Today we're going to jump right into modeling. For those of you that were on the call the end of last year, we're talking about focusing on three areas this year. Mostly, we're not going to stick to that completely, but we want to stick with modeling, the operating model, and then anything around AI that we can bring you that's new. So today the big focus is going to be on modeling. And we'll go through what that is in a few minutes. I'd just like to give an intro here in the beginning for anybody that's new. If today's your first time, we like to keep a really active chat. And Charles is on the call. Charles and I are co-owners of the Digital Services Forum, along with two others on our team. And we go through the chat and we make sure that any action items that we take out of there. So please use the chat, and especially if it's your first time, to introduce yourself so we know where you're from and what you're here for. Okay, now what I will put in the chat, and right after I get done here, we'll let some more people come in, is I'll go ahead and put in this link to our community. And this is the best way. If you just keep that one link, it'll get you to everything. So you'll go to a page that's about the Digital Services Forum, and then it'll give you the Zoom meeting. It'll give you the link to the community so that you have the blogs where we put all the content that we share on these calls. And then it'll give you the YouTube playlist, and then it'll give you a link to ask for access to our instance. So if you do want to come into our instance, which we use to do demos, I will give you an admin account. If you just send me an email, and when you click on the link that I send, you'll be able to see where you can ask for that admin account. So we try to get everything on one page, so that you're not hunting and pecking for emails all over the place. Also, if I've ever sent you an email, on the bottom in my signature block, I have a link to that same page. Okay, so this lets you do all of that from that one spot. Without further ado, we'll get into our agenda. So today we're going to have Mary's going to kick us off. She's our principal portfolio manager, and she's first-time speaker. She's been definitely involved in some of a lot of the content we got from Mary. So she's been involved with the group before, but this is her first time speaking. I think it is, right, Mary?
Yeah, it is.
Awesome. Well, we're gonna definitely tap her more this year on a lot of the stuff that I shared when I did the roadmap for CMDB was all Mary's material. And then we have Charles, who you all heard from before. Charles is one of our co-hosts, so he'll be definitely taking us through how he's used some models on some of his accounts in the past. But before I hand it off to Mary, I just want to tell you two quick things. I'm working on the backlog. So some of you will get emails from me. And I know, Tina, thank you for accepting. So Tina will be speaking on strategic planning along with one of our product managers. And then we're also teeing up something I started to write it here, but on value streams. So we're going to do a meeting on value streams where we have an art of the possible. And then we have something like a really basic getting started. How can I get started with those value stream tables? And then I reached out to a couple other of you from again, from the meeting notes that Richard, I reached out to you about some topics around microservices. So we're planning our content for Q1. So if you do get emails from Charles or I, it's probably about that, probably about the content. Right, with that, I'll hand it over to Mary. And I think, Mary, you're just going to take over the screen share, right?
Yes, I am.
All right, and welcome. Looking forward to your presentation.
All right. All right, so today's topic is going to be how product models within the CSDM, that foundational piece of data, works with records that are in the CMDB and how that usage is across the ServiceNow platform. For those that don't know me, I'm Mary Vanatta. I'm a principal portfolio manager of ITOM, and I also do CMDB, CSDM. My function here is to provide leading practices for implementation. I have been doing implementations with ServiceNow for at least 5 years. I worked as a customer and then as a consultant, and now I'm here sharing my experience with you here at ServiceNow. Our leading practices group updates and maintains the content that you see in Now Create. and now Create is, as anybody knows, if they've ever gone to it, it's to the behind the Now Learning platform. I have about 9 years of experience in the ServiceNow ecosystem, again, starting as a customer, and I'm located in Wichita, Kansas. So that's a little bit about me. I've been in IT for actually 25 years. So anything I talk about, I've pretty much touch on a day-to-day basis. So today's talk, we're just going to talk about how important that product model is. And I think it's probably one of those things, especially back early when I started with ServiceNow, was a forgotten piece of data. Like if we didn't know where the data went, we created a custom table. So we really want to bring out to all of our customers how important the product model is. And for those that don't know, it's a specific version or configuration of a product. We're all very familiar with this in our own personal lives, whether we buy a Ford Escape or we buy a Honda or a Toyota Camry. Those are different products and product models. So it defines whether the product is tracked as an asset, a CI, or both. The product model is captured both on the configuration and asset record and is maintained in the product catalog, but it's also captured in many other CMDB records, which we will talk about today. So some of the capabilities that I'm speaking about today depend upon whether APM, SAM, or SAM Pro is licensed. And some capabilities like manage the technology features and TPM are not available without a license of some of those other products. So you were all familiar with the common service data model. I'm just going to call out, this is the part that we're talking about today, the product model table. It again just shows that this is a very foundational data point, and I like to actually kind of call it the glue that holds a lot of the records within the CSDM model together. So the product model uses are demonstrated here. And I think, as I said, product models exist in our daily lives. They exist in every organization. You just need to think of the different models of laptops, different versions of software or applications. And maybe you have different service models that you offer your, if you're a customer service management, you have different service models you may be offering your customers. So when you have a new product model, typically a new version of software has been introduced into the environment. We want to talk about that being here in the ideation stage. Here in the ideation stage, customers may make it, or employees may make a demand to replace a piece of software. They want to go with a new version, a new model, maybe a new product altogether. And then, that goes in through a project and it begins to, in that design mode or even rationalization mode, become a business application within your organization. We're going to use Agile and the SDLC components of DevOps to build out the new application and get it deployed into the organization. In its operational status, we're looking at the application services and then any of the business services or technical services so that we can perform service operations. And then the end of life and even beginning of life is within the asset and product management portfolios. So here we want to talk about the model data hierarchy. Product models represent a set of products. So we have application models, we have software models, hardware and consumable models, service models, contract and facility models. And I think one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about this is I was first working as a senior TC in a consultancy, and one of the other senior TCs was building out a service catalog, and he didn't know how to build out all the applications that they would need service catalog items on. What did he do? He was a developer. He created a custom table because he was not aware of that the software and application model tables is where we want to kind of keep that data. And so then later on, when that customer came back to us to implement software asset management, we didn't have any product models because they, at the time, were doing things in a very manual, manner. So the model category configuration determines that if the ServiceNow platform creates an asset from a CI, and if so, what class is that asset? That asset, again, is the hardware, software, consumable. And there's different types. There's physical types, logical types, documentation types. There's different sources that could be coming from internal teams, vendors. There's could be a different product owner and team, especially if you're a product-centric IT. And then critical for lifecycle management from idea, as I showed early, from idea to digital product and service. So I know John has spoke a lot on this forum about digital product management, and this is the foundation for that. If you don't have the data in the right place here, digital product management is not going to be as productive or as valuable as you'd like it to be. So if you have a product model that is not represented in an enterprise asset management content service yet, you haven't created it yet, you can create a custom product model. And this is found where to do that, you can do that in your enterprise asset workspace and under the normalization tab. So an example for consumable model, there's a lot of use cases across the platform, and one I'd like to call out for the healthcare industry that a lot of people may not be aware of is the medication product model is an extended table from the CMDB consumable product table. So that's where even our medical application ties into this. So again, we're really emphasizing how important some of these product model classifications are. And again, here's a standard diagram here that I think could resonate with most people in IT. You have a Windows server. What model is that server? And then what that helps with is knowing when we need to deprecate that server, especially if it's one that's a virtualization server running a lot of other servers on it. We need to stay up to date with those models so that we can deprecate it and retire it in a timely manner. Any questions so far? If you do, just drop them in the chat and we can answer them as we go.
Quite much today.
Yeah. Hopefully this is an interesting topic and I'm not just boring them to sleep here. So every CI and asset should reference the product model. Again, those types are physical, logical documents. It's critical, again, for the lifecycle management. And so this is where in the CI class manager, you can add attributes to those model ID, and the model ID field, like on a server record, on an application service record, on a business application, all reference that model ID attribute. Okay, in San Diego Plus, it automatically creates a product model for logical CIs and references them. Customers who are migrating from a product-centric management to get a head start on transition for logical types don't have to create them manually. And some logical product model that we're all very familiar with CSDM, or the business services, technical services, business applications, service offering, all have logical product models. In other words, they cannot be discovered. They have to manually have somebody that's maintaining those models as part of their day-to-day work and their work being done within site of ServiceNow.
We've got a question. Can you talk about the relationship between application hyphen software model and how it might also relate to the service model?
Yes, we actually get into that a little bit deeper into the presentation. And if I don't answer your question, then I'll be more than happy to take some time with you after. So the product model management record, again, I think this is one of the most forgotten records. It's there if you're not using an automated means to populate it. It really does require, when you're setting up, if you're new to ServiceNow, you're greenfield, make sure somebody's tracking the models, that because you will later use that with hardware asset management. You'll use it in the service catalog, software asset. I know from my experience, a lot of customers started out with ITSM. They said, yeah, we want the service catalog, right? Build out, because that was cool. It really showed that you did something when we have all these cool service catalog records. But in that process, if they didn't have discovery and they really hadn't built out a complete CMDB, the product model table was forgotten. And this helps really with that software obsolescence. And it also helps with knowing who managed those various products. So one of the things that we want to call out is asset tracking strategy. It says leave to category. It synchronizes with asset management. What's out of box typically works. We've had customers shut that off or think that they wanted to have a requirement and then later on didn't realize that out of box it works. Virtual assets, you can actually say on a virtual asset that you do not want it to create a asset inside of hardware asset management, because a virtual server is not a hardware asset, even though there's a financial component to it. Sometimes they're not alive long enough to even track for more than, if a server's up for 4 hours, there's no asset to that. So that will override the model category creation of those virtual assets you discover. So yeah, this is all of the different product use cases for this product model management record. And we recommend best practices, leading practices team, really recommends that you have somebody managing these records in the platform. So again, like I said, when you create a CI, it would create a hardware like computer. It would create a hardware asset. Likewise, if you create a hardware inside of asset management, it would create a CI. You want to make sure for leading practices that your organization is going out on a regular basis to the store app or through the plugins and updating your CI class models, because we are consistently adding new class models that extend the CMDB class hierarchy. And I just want to say, typically you shouldn't be creating models manually, and just as we really don't recommend, you might have if you're a very small organization and you have somebody who wants to keep up the records for the CMDB, they also need to be updating the product model records as well. There are many, as I said, data points across the platform that interconnect, and they create that thread in their digital fabric. So missing and inaccurate data leads to holes in that fabric. So by not knowing what products you have, you may have a server or some software that's needing to be deprecated and it causes an outage. So automated model creation are best created first with an external automated population, such as discovery, service graph connectors, agent client collectors, service graph connectors. We have so many of them that pull in data from other tools like Titanium, Logic Monitor, Splunk, those kind of things. So when we run the discovery, goes through the mid server as part of what we call the identification exploration phases. It obtains those models of hardware and software, and it populates the CMDB. So if you run discovery, you populate a server, you're going to see that model ID populated. What you're not going to see is who owns that product model. You're not going to see some of that logical data that requires human knowledge and processes to populate. And then, of course, the service graph connectors do the same way. And then there's a piece where you normalize that data, because if you have application packaging within your organization, somebody could have packaged a Microsoft product or some other Adobe product and used Adobe Ink versus Adobe. So when you get into doing software asset management, it's really important that we've normalized on the manufacturer's name. And there is a process for doing that, which we won't actually cover today. It's out on the doc site. So product model management lifecycle stages and status. So on that record, it looks at application, software, hardware, and contract model. And these are the lifecycle stages that are on that record. It might be under evaluation. This is where you're deciding if you want to purchase this new software, and then it, be in the pilot stage. Once it's in the pilot stage and your organization has decided to invest in this and build it out, the stage is design and the status is build. Then it moves into, now we've deployed it for our organization, goes into an operational, and now we're using it. And then as we decide we want to deprecate that maybe want to deprecate a model, go to a new version, we would then retire, or it may be like a server. We would sell that at the end of life. So let's talk a little more about this inside of application portfolio management specifically. And I want to point this out because a lot of customers may have been on ServiceNow way before Kingston. And if so, and they're just now thinking about doing APM, they're going to see the software model attribute here. You need to remove that and reconfigure it and add the model ID attribute to the record. And that's so that the data points are all connecting. This was due to, it doesn't remove when you upgrade, because there are organizations that may have been using that attribute. Maybe they did deploy APM. So if you're not getting the connection you need, that may be something to look for there. So here, the model ID is when it's created here, it's in the application product model table. And some more, I'll get into a little bit what's the difference between an application product model versus a software model. And now this is auto created in Vancouver. So if you are not on Vancouver and you are adding a model ID to your business application record, you will have to click here, click new, create a new one, and add it manually. Then if you're on Vancouver and you use the model ID, you type it in and it automatically puts that information on the application product model table. If you're doing TPM, technology tracking your tech debt, the technology reference model, for example, defines all standards for software applications that are used in your organization. So you can define the software and the software versions that you want to be using in product, and you can add new software products to that library and approve or reject requests by other stakeholders. So if you want to associate service models to a software model without the activation of SAM Pro, then you will manually need to create that connection. However, to do that, you can, if you want to do it automated and you have Software Asset Management Pro, you can just click Manage Technology Portfolio or Manage Technology Models. Any questions on that? Okay. I can't see the chat, so if you just want to,
Yes, so
Charles.
there was a comment, we can't use discovery, so we have to create them manually. And then another comment, data normalization is the challenging piece in my experience. We'll routinely get the duplications.
Mhm.
And then I put a sort of a reply in, but I think it's only a half reply of product models are logical concepts, that they're software or hardware on a shelf available to buy, as opposed to your more operational CIs, the specific, like here's a specific server that's a specific serial number of a specific model. And so how would you address the normalization piece? You talked to like earlier, automate using automation or something to
Yeah.
handle the population of the product models table.
Right. So if you're not using Discovery, are you automatically populating your CMDB with Service Graph and Agent Client Collector Visibility? Are two good other options to automate. Of course, we have REST APIs that you can connect and bring in data from another third-party software. But if you're manually populating your CMDB, that's just another part of it. I remember when I was a server administrator and we were, this was the days before virtualization was just coming on board. We had a spreadsheet and we knew when our Dell, yeah, I think they were R710s, and we were aware and we had looked at the new models every year, like desktops. I was working for an organization that had 400 desktops, and we would evaluate, do we want to go to IBM or HP? Do we want the next version of HP? Which version did we want? And so then you are manually updating that. You have to then, when you're doing manual work, you're going to have to make sure you have some naming standards, which should help if you're not automated and you're manually populating the product model table, then it behooves you to have some processes and procedures around naming standards so that you don't have to mess with the data normalization. But if you then turn it on and what's being found in the environment, is Microsoft versus Microsoft Inc. Yeah, the data normalization isn't an easy process, but it is a necessary process, and to take the time to clean up that data.
There's another comment here about what might be the source for application models. Does Vancouver create app models to mirror business apps? And I guess I'll comment here. I would be highly suspicious of mirroring app models on business apps. They're not the same thing. One is software that's available to purchase or use. The other is your specific instance of software that might be based on that software to use, but I can have multiple instances of it. So if you're mirroring them, if you're creating sort of a one-to-one between them, first of all, that's the reason why there's two separate tables, is they're not one-to-one. Second is you're going to create a big data mess as you try and figure out, like, I've got 5 instances of SharePoint. I don't have necessarily 5 different models of SharePoint. That's kind of distinguished there.
The way I like to think about it is the application product model says, this is the thing we have. Like if you go down a grocery store, this is where the canned food is. It's canned food. But the various versions of canned food are different. So that's where that versioning piece, that software model fits inside. So you can have SAP S/4HANA ERP, and I'm not sure what version model they're on, so forgive me. But if you have 5.0, 4.0 in your environment. And a real world experience I can share with you is a large manufacturer out of Indianapolis. If you're on the phone, hey, you might recognize me. They had engineers that used MATLAB and think about AutoCAD and CATIA. This usually always happens. One group of engineers want to use, CATIA 4.0, and another set of engineers want to use version 5.0. Your application product model is going to be CATIA, but your software versions are going to be 4.0 and 5.0. And then I'll show you how that ties in to the product model table here in a little bit. So if you're creating it manually, you can see what happens. It adds it to these model categories: software, business application, and application service. So if you do create it manually, you need to add it to these model categories. So a little bit about DevOps. This is a forward statement. I've heard that they're going to be making with DevOps. Is any customers on the call that are currently using DevOps? If so, just raise your hand. And Charles, could you let me know? All right. So DevOps is not a product that's used by a lot of our customers. The ones that are using it will remain supported, but I don't believe they're going to be making any future upgrades to the DevOps product. And that's a forward-looking statement, and not necessarily to be concerned about at this point. So in DevOps, you can make it in the change workspace. You can create an application tied to an application product model to track DevOps configurations and changes. So DevOps change velocity is an application that collects up all the up-to-date data that connects tools to send plans, repositories, and pipelines. You must create an application to enable traceability for user stories, commits, test results, and more. So associating plans, repositories, and pipelines to an application also enables that pipeline modeling, change governance, and metric reporting. So you would use the change workspace, again, like I said, to create that DevOps application record, and it's stored in the DevOps app table. So an application is needed to group those plans, repositories, and pipelines. Okay, so now technology portfolio management. This is where you're going to see that CSDM data in technology portfolio management. This organization has SAP S/4HANA. They have it deployed in 2 locations, one in the US and then one in Japan. And they have a separate application service because in Japan, it displays in Japanese. And so therefore, they would have separate service offerings that support those different application services. And then, of course, the one in the US uses the version 2021, and the software model 2020 is still used in Japan. We could actually say in a real world instance, maybe they're looking to upgrade now and they're in the middle of upgrading. They upgraded the US first and they're going to update Japan next. But this gives the, says, hey, this software may be needing to be updated. Then you have your software models, and SAP S/4HANA can be ran on Enterprise Server 15 or Enterprise Server 12. This is getting to end of life. It's starting to let the customer know that they may need to have a demand and a project to replace those servers, and then whatever hardware model is being used for that. So when that hardware reaches into life, it's less performant, so it can lead to degradations and outages. So TPM enables you to create demands or products to address those pending end of life situations in advance. So we find product models within the Agile, the story. We talked a little bit about how that ties in from DevOps, but there's that product model there. And I'm always kind of surprised that we have a product model, but it's not being used consistently across the platform. And then we wonder why we're not getting value out of the platform. It's because you got different teams. We have different teams saying this is what the product models are, and in PPM, we've got different teams saying this is what the product models are. And inside the service catalog, got some customers using custom tables. So here, this just points to the CMDB model list, and then the model category equals software. And that way you get that software version there. So the application service, if you don't have it, you need to add the model ID. And this is where you're going to dictate when you create an application service, just like I said, if you have different installations across your organization, you're going to have different application services, because an application service, again, is dependent upon the deployed version of that software. And so this is where you're going to track that software model right here on the application service. That way, when it is related back up to the business and it consumes by consumes relationship, the business application can consume information about how well this application is performing. Is the 2021 version performing as well as we expected? Are we seeing still a lot of incidents around the 2020 version? Any questions on that? Okay, so asset management. Where do we see the product model? Everybody's probably most familiar with this. The product model, this is that asset, create an asset. We want it to, if it's on the configuration item, we want to make sure that the product model is the same on the hardware. Also, I would denote if your application, if you have a one-to-one, like you only have one application service and you have one business application, doesn't have multiple versions, there is not necessarily a synchronization between the model ID. So if you put it on the business application record, you want to verify, you want to make that part of your data verification, is that the application service has the same version of software, or at least it's part of the underneath that application product model, sorry. And that's another use case for the application product model being on the business application, is that you don't have a software, you don't have a business application record for every version of software you have. So here again, in the software asset models, you can view all the different versions you may have running in your organization, or what you may have had and it may be set to inactive, or that the life cycle. That way, some remote location isn't left, oh, hey, we never updated that location. We still see, 2013 running. So the software model record, again, everybody should know when you create a software model record, it takes the publisher plus the, I think the model ID, and it creates the display name. And you can do a kind of a search for that. The version starts with the edition is anything, it's a platform, and then here you get your software product life cycles. This is where you manually track. Somebody can go out there online and they can see, hey, this is when it was generally available. This is when the end of support is, and somebody needs to have reports on that to know when those models are coming to the end of support or end of life. And then on the software entitlement for software asset management, you'll see that again here, this product model, it needs to tie back to your licensing, because you don't want to be paying for licenses you're not using. And I'll call out that
You're at time.
What's that?
You're at time. So
Okay.
any last questions for Mary?
If anybody wants to see the rest of this presentation, you can go out to Now Create. So it's nowlearning.service-now.com/now create. If you hit the sign in and you're taken to Now Learning, just append the URL to Now Create, where you're noticing some issues with that, and you can download this presentation.
And Mary, if you can stick around in the chat, there are some great sort of questions and comments there that I think you should weigh in on if you've got time.
Absolutely.
Joshua asked, can you get a copy of the deck? As John posted earlier in the chat, they will be posted out on the forum by Monday.
All right, so I'm going to stop the share here and let you take over.
Okay. And why did Zoom decide to go away? So I'm no longer monitoring the chat. Feel free to ask questions directly. I'm going to fit this in pretty quickly. We were scrambling on getting some topics for today, but my topics is going to be much more generic. It's going to be higher level about sort of how to think about models as opposed to specifics of the CSDM or the specific of the product model. And I wrote this humorously a couple of years ago for a presentation I did for a former employer. I call it Lie, Cheat, and Steal Your Way to an Effective Model. And of course, I'm not recommending lying, cheating, or stealing. Those are just mnemonics to help you remember how to think about models. So first of all, a little bit about me. Like, I am an enterprise architect. I've been solution architect. I've been portfolio manager a lot at really big companies over my career. Even more than as an architect, I think of myself as a modeler. I'm someone that likes solving tough problems using models. They're my tool of choice, no matter what's sort of problem I'm going to face. And in fact, I challenged myself on this particular presentation, no drawings at all. Though I do have a picture of the CSDM, but I didn't draw anything here because that's my normal way of thinking, is drawing. So I want to start with just what is a model. And the most generic reference I got is it's a representation of a subject of interest. And another one, a version I saw of this, of a definition, talked about it as an abstraction of something you're interested in. And I really like that. And I'll get to this when we get to the lie section a little bit more. Models are versions, or that they're a tool you can use to think about something or to communicate something. And I've got some examples of models here. A map. You're all familiar with like the Mercator projection, and you've probably even heard how like it makes Greenland look too big and Africa look too small, that sort of thing. There's multiple types of maps, including satellite maps. They're models. Statistical models. Those are used for all sorts of things, from finance to election projection, that sort of thing. Written language is a model of verbal language. If you think about the difference between how you speak English and how you write English, they're really different things, but they're related. What the written language is a representation of that verbal language. You've all seen a building architect as opposed to a software architect's model of a building that helps get the idea of here's what we're all going to try and build together. Oops, I got statistical model in there twice. I'll fix that. Roadmaps, a model of activity over time. Music notation. I love this one. I'm a musician. I'm learning several instruments right now. Musical notation is a model of the music that you play. And sometimes it's not even a very accurate model of the music that you're going to play. I had to pull up a funny meme here. You've probably seen this out there, and if any of you are musicians, the Amadeus Cafe, if you look at the music as it's written here and you tried to play that on an instrument, what this is the Flintstones song. Flintstones, meet the Flintstones. So I always just find that one amusing. Weather and climate models, those are different types of models. So all of these are representations of something that somebody was interested in. I'm going to focus specifically on architectural models for the rest of this, because that's the type I play with, meaning software architecture or enterprise architecture models. And there's a common question about models versus diagrams. And the big difference between a model and a diagram or a picture is a model has a database behind it. So a diagram is basically a picture. You might generate it from a model. It tends to be free form, meaning there's no rules, there's no syntax, there's no deeper meanings sort of behind the things. If you draw a square, it's a square. And how somebody interprets that square is up to them. If we flip to an architectural and a modeling tool, you've got a database backend. If I update a record in the database, then all the representations of that record on all the diagrams are going to update instantly. So if I change the name of an object, I said my business application used to be called ServiceNow, and now it's called Carts, which is an instance of ServiceNow I know at a customer. Everywhere that was referenced in every single diagram, it would be updated instantly. Models are going to allow you to do some more sophisticated analysis than a diagram will. They tend to be based on one or more modeling standards. And depending on your modeling program, they may enforce syntax. That means like this type of object can connect to another type of object, but only in certain ways. And models typically have three different ways of viewing the modeled content. One will be a diagram or a picture. One will be a matrix where you're showing on different axes, like here's business applications in one axis and application services in another axis, and show me the relationships between those. And then catalogs or lists, which is the usual way that we sort of view things in ServiceNow. So I'm going to start here with why you should not create a model. And it's pretty simple. It's when details don't matter or when the subject is trivial. Modeling has a lot of overhead. And so if the thing you're working on isn't really that interesting or it's not that complex, don't waste your time setting up a model for it. It's way too complex. Just draw your pictures, deal with it. Flipping to why model. And it's the inverse of that. When you want to analyze, document, or communicate about the model's subject. So it's back to there's something you're interested in and you really want to think deeply about it. You really want to document it well, and you want to communicate your findings from your analysis and your documentation to others. That's the number one reason why you would pull out modeling as a tool. Also, when you need to manage the details of large and complex things, I get bored easily personally. And if the subject's too simple, I just kind of tune it out. I want to work on complex things. I want to work on things that are hard. And models are great for allowing me to work on super complex things that I can't manage in my head or on spreadsheets or whatever by myself. The next major reason for modeling is when you need to connect multiple viewpoints, where you're talking about different aspects of the same stuff. In Mary's part, we were talking about hardware and software product models and business applications and app services and app CIs. those are all different facets of the same thing. They're talking about different aspects. They're connecting in different ways. They're a simulation of the real thing. And different people are interested in them. Your software asset management people are interested in licensing aspect of the thing. Your dev team's interested in the coding versions of the thing. And your operations team is interested in your deployed instances of those things. So a model is great for connecting those multiple viewpoints and allowing them to be consistent with one another. When you need traceability and rigor, and also when I need continuity over time, and I'm willing to put in the effort to maintain it, it's really not worth going down the modeling path if you're not willing to maintain models over time. They're hard to maintain. They take effort. They help you over time. They can make a lot of things easier, but it's not a one and done activity. So I'm going to get to lying here. And I think this is best explained by the quote from George Box here: all models are wrong, some models are useful. He was a British statistician, and he's referring to statistical models here, like that are used in finance or election forecasting, that sort of thing. And this is the first part of a model that I really want to drive home with you is every last one of them is wrong. They're not real. There is no 100% correct way to model anything of any type of model anywhere. And by lie here, I'm meaning, since you're not 100% truthful, accurate, everything that you do in a model of any type of model is going to be wrong in one or more degrees. And I want you to realize that fact and set yourself free from perfectionism. Most people, when they start getting into models, their number one thing they start trying to do is be perfect with their model. And this includes CSDM. They're trying to be perfect with how they use all the things in the CSDM. And if you start from this concept that all models are wrong, and you're not trying to be right, you're not trying to be 100% truthful, you're going to start focusing on the useful. What are you trying to do? Does your model help you understand that, communicate that, think about that in a better way? Related to lying, I'd say here is storytelling. And well, let me hold off on that. So what makes a useful model? I'm going to say it's when it tells its intended story to its intended audiences in a medium that they can understand. I should have bolded the medium part here too. So it's the three parts. Every model's got a story or a point that it's trying to get across. Every model has an audience, and every model is being expressed in a medium. And how you put your effort into the model depends on which of these three you're focusing on. But I'll say the most important here is your story and your audience. If you don't understand the story you're trying to tell with a model, and if you don't understand your audience, and if they understand how you're telling that story, you're kind of wasting your time. One of the hardest parts of modeling is knowing what details to include and knowing when to stop. And I'll go back to that storytelling aspect. If every model's a story, then only include details that support your story, relevant to your audiences. Break it up into digestible chunks. I'm deeply opposed to like the big, massive architecture diagram you've all seen. That's a spaghetti chart that has boxes and 15 different colors going all over the place, and you sit there and you look at it like, what's going on here? The story got lost in that type of model. It's trying to talk to too many people about too many things. Go back to simplicity of messaging, focus on your audience, focus on the story you're telling, focus on how to break that into chunks that they can understand, and then stop when you've accomplished your purpose. Even though your modeling language might let you express other things, even though you know you're not telling the entire truth of the thing, you're not showing all the details that you can possibly show, stop modeling when your story's told. Everything else is just extra detail. Here's our good friend CSDM. I was hoping to have a bit more discussion time on this, but I'll come back to like when I encounter a diagram like this, what I mean as an architect, what I'm immediately asking myself is, who is this for? Now, fortunately, this one answers that. If you look, all the little head icons over here all throughout. So I know who my audience is. It's these people, and I can infer it's also people that are interested in ServiceNow data. And if I look at each one of these colored areas, I can see all of those different people are associated with certain areas of this model. So I'm starting to infer the story here. And this is something I really hope you guys can take away from this, is every time you see architecture diagrams or models, start with asking yourself, who's the audience? What's the story that's being told? So in this case, the story that's being told to all of these different personas or roles around the edges are, here are the data elements and the relationships of those data elements that help you manage your technical services, or manage your software builds, or manage your design and portfolio, or sell and consume your business services. You can infer that from the model. That makes this a fairly effective model. In the interest of time, I'm going to move on to cheat. And my next quote here: bend the rules only if you have learned them, break the rules only if you have mastered them. Modeling is hard. So one of the main things that distinguishes a model from a diagram, if you remember back, is you're based on a standard when you model. You're based on a certain sort of schema, syntax, however you want to call it. They talk modeling languages: Archimate, UML, SysML. But you go down the list. Put your time in to really master and understand those languages. A lot of thought from a lot of brilliant people went into making those, and they're made for specific purposes. And so, like, when you look at the CSDM, that is, in a sense, what modelers will call a meta model. It's a language for how to describe CIs and the relationships to software and products and services and all the rest of that. Put your time into studying that. Put your time into understanding all of that before you start customizations. But those modeling languages, the CSDM, are generic. They're telling stories for most people. They're not necessarily telling a story for your audience. You want to make sure you're paying attention to how it's supposed to be done, going back to here's the rules of the particular language or whatever you're doing, but break the rules, also known as customization, with purpose to tell your own story. I use the Archimate modeling language a lot, and one of the areas that I find it's really deficient in is talking business value. They've got a value object, but if I'm trying to talk the financial aspects of things, it's not a very rich language for that. So I do a fair amount of customization in my models to tell a financial story that Archimate, the business language, won't let me tell. So that's an example of breaking the rules. I'm customizing a language, but I'm doing it with purpose because I need to tell the financial aspects of the story, not just the technical or the business or the process. Another thing to remember here is the model is seldom the final medium of communication. Most people don't understand models. If you put a model in front of them, they don't know what they're seeing. So especially if your audience aren't fellow architects. So your model is going to help you think about things. It's going to help you be consistent. It's going to help you be traceable. You're often going to need to translate it often into like a Word document or a PowerPoint presentation or a talk like this. So be prepared. Coming back, the model isn't reality. It's a story you're telling about something, and maybe the story is for your purposes, so you understand something deeply so you can help somebody else with it. The last part here is stealing. And so I've got a quote here from Pablo Picasso. I nearly did a Beastie Boys quote, but Picasso, this quote from him is, good artists copy, great artists steal. And the point here is stealing's involving interacting with multiple people, and in this scenario, stealing ideas from other people. You cannot model in isolation. Modeling is a community sport. Oops, got it in there twice. So I do a lot of models sort of for my own purpose, and I've got a picture here of a Barry sax player named Leo P, who does a lot of busking in New York subways. and he's amazing. He plays amazing sax, and he's having a lot of fun, and his audience is enjoying it. But he's doing that by himself. It's limited in its impact. When he gets together, this is him on the far right, with a group of people, they can do amazing things. The impact is amplified. The quality is greater. I've got a link to the actual YouTube video. I encourage you to watch it. It's a version of Funky Town, and I Feel Good. It's a great song. The point here is community. So if you're modeling by yourself, you're going to get wrapped up in your head. You're going to be reading those standards. You're going to get confused about what a business app is versus an app service versus a software product, all of that we were kind of talking about in the forum or in the chat. If you've got a community, you can work through that better. You can share models, you can share struggles, you can share examples, you can take examples from other people and use them in your work to help make your job. You can get and give critical feedback. The important thing here is working with others. Modeling by yourself is almost never worth it. It's a community effort. So wrapping this up, because I know we're just a tad over time. We in the Digital Services Forum talked about we're going to focus on models over this next year. This is kind of my introduction to how I'm approaching that. I'm wanting to start building that community, using this forum and asking deeper questions about how we model things, when we model things, how to do it right. Keep in mind, you don't have to be perfect. It's a story. I want to start doing that stealing part with the rest of you. So I look forward to the rest of the year, and thank you for attending this session. We'll let you go again. Sorry for going just a bit over.